So in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 ways that you can make your soy milk homemade, simple, and more efficient. So are you still using a nut milk bag or even considering using a nut milk bag to make homemade soy milk? Or maybe even considering using that along with some pots and your gas or electric stove? Well, that's what I used to use until I learned about a few tools and also some techniques that you can use to help you make your soy milk homemade a lot quicker and simple without compromise on flavor. How about that? Konnichiwa, Pat Tokuyama here, creator of All Day I Eat Like a Shark and the Japanese Cooking Club, where I help people learn how to make plant-based Japanese food. If this is your first time here, consider saying hello in the comments below, as well as subscribing and hitting the alarm bell if you want to see more plant-based Japanese cooking videos, kind of like this one today. So if you think plant-based milk is difficult, think again. I just finished reading the second of 2 books by Pam Grout. One is known as E Squared and the second one is called E Cubed, and both of those books have to do with the power of your thoughts and how they can affect your reality. So if you're interested in the power of your thoughts and the power of positive thinking, you might want to check those 2 books out. I'll link them in the description below. And the fun part is, if you've never heard of these books before, they're actually a collection of different experiments with which you can try out yourself within a day or a few days, and you'll be able to experience for yourself whether or not you are able to influence your reality and the things around you with the power of thought, your brain, your mind. And you might be in for a pleasant surprise, perhaps. Kamoshiranai? Maybe. I know that I was when I did a couple of the experiments, which I'll be sharing with you in the near future. So try it out and see for yourself if you can experience the power within. So now that you know that plant-based milk is simple, you can make it as often and as quickly as you'd like. And even almost with the push of a button and a turn of a handle. Don't know what I'm talking about? I'll tell you in just a few minutes. And in fact, I'm going to be sharing a couple of my tips to help you make your homemade soy milk, or any kind of plant-based milk for that matter, much quicker than you might have been doing it previously. Better, faster, less fussy, and as quickly as humanly possible. You are a human, aren't you? I think so. So if you're in the US, or maybe even outside, any country outside of Asia, where it might be a little bit more difficult to find freshly made soy milk, this video could be for you. It's definitely easier in certain countries, like in China, Japan, Vietnam, Thailand, all those countries, which you can readily find soy milk out and about when you're walking around. But if you're not in those countries, it might be a little bit more difficult. So in that case, you have a couple of options. One is to make it yourself, and then the second would be to buy it at the store. Atarimae-jan, obviously. But if you don't want to buy something that has been made to be shelf stable or has preservatives or other things added to it, your next best bet would be to make it from scratch. Soy milk made from scratch generally only calls for 2 ingredients. One is going to be water, and then the second one is going to be soybeans. So it's pretty simple. And as you may know, nothing tastes quite as delicious as homemade soy milk, freshly made from just water and soybeans. So the first thing that I was going to share with you to make your soy milk a little bit more efficient in terms of the production process is to use a high-speed blender. So as you may know, I am a big fan of my immersion blender, my immersion stick blender by KitchenAid. It's cordless, and as much as I love it and I use it all the time for all kinds of different things, it's not exactly what I would call powerful as compared to something like a Vitamix. So if you've never considered getting a Vitamix, highly recommended. It's one of the best blenders that you can get, and there's a reason why it's used in commercial kitchens like restaurants, smoothie bars for example, because it does a really good job of pureeing whatever it is that you put in it. And because it's so powerful, it'll puree your soybeans when you're making your soy milk really well and really quickly as compared to something like a regular kitchen blender or a immersion blender like the one that I usually use. So if you don't have a Vitamix, that's something that I would recommend. If you don't want to get one, that's totally fine too. Just use whatever you have. But just know if you had a high-speed blender, that would be one of the things that would help to make your soy milk production process a little bit quicker. So the second thing is to buy a soy milk maker. So I did a review of the Soyajoy G4 soy milk maker, which is an electric soy milk machine. So if you've never heard of the Soyajoy G4, it sounds kind of fancy, but it's actually not that fancy. It's basically a container, a metal container with a little immersion blender on top. And how this works is basically the bottom part cooks the milk while the top part with the blender attached purees everything. And this actually saves multiple steps in the soy milk making process. So you don't have to worry about your scorching of the milk, because the pot itself is going to regulate the temperature as compared to your electric induction burner or your gas stove, with which you have to watch the heat. The second benefit of using the Soyajoy G4 or any kind of electric soy milk maker is you don't have to worry about it overflowing. So if you've ever cooked soy milk on the stove and had it overflow, you know that it makes quite a mess, that it's very difficult to clean up, especially if you let your soy milk get crusted on the stove. You gotta scrub really hard, and it's not very fun to clean up. So because the electric soy milk maker regulates the temperature, you don't have to worry about your soy milk boiling over or coming out of the container. The third thing is that you don't have to worry about transferring the hot liquids from your blender to your pot, or from your pot to your blender to your strainer. And so that saves another step. So after you're done making the soy milk in the electric soy milk maker, all you got to do is strain it out. So while those are three of the benefits, it does have some drawbacks, and one of them is capacity. So it's not going to allow you to make a large quantity of soy milk. The Soyajoy is limited to 1.7 liters of soy milk, so that's going to be the max. If you wanted to make a bigger batch than that, you'd have to get 2. And that's something that you can consider as well if you're making soy milk. And then the third thing is that the texture is going to be slightly different. The flavor is a little bit different, the color is a little bit different as compared to when you make it on the stove the traditional way. So you may or may not notice, for me it's very subtle. I don't think I'd be able to tell in a blind taste test, but that's also something to consider, is that the blender that's part of the electric soy milk maker is not going to be as powerful as the Vitamix. So maybe all of the soy milk will not get extracted out of the soybeans, which is going to result in a slightly different texture and flavor, which you may or may not notice. The third thing is going to be to make a big batch. So there's this book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, which you may have heard of, and if you haven't, I'll link that in the description below. I guess we're talking a lot about books today, and basically it's about concentrating on a task at hand, being more efficient and more productive when you do so. So you might have heard of something called context switching, which means when you're switching from one task to another task, your brain actually takes a little bit of time to sort of get acquainted with whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're able to batch your cooking, for example, or batch anything that you're doing, you're probably going to be a little bit more efficient versus if you did this thing for like 5 minutes, this thing for another 5 minutes, and then a third thing for like another 5 or 10 minutes. Each time you switch tasks and you're doing something different, that's called context switching, and your brain takes time to adjust and to get acquainted with what it is that you're doing, and that takes time. So mental energy, if you want to conserve that and be a little bit more productive and more efficient, highly recommend that you batch produce your soy milk. So what I do when I'm making my soy milk is try to eliminate as much of the preparation part as possible by soaking my beans and also de-skinning them. So I'll generally make maybe anywhere from 4 to 6 cups of dried soybeans, soak them, de-skin them, and then I'll use maybe 1 or 2 cups worth to make fresh soy milk, and then the rest I will freeze. If I had a larger freezer, I would probably make more, but I don't, so I usually limit it at that because my freezer has other stuff in it. But that's something that you can consider as well, is to batch produce your soy milk. And then the fourth tip, which you may be somewhat surprised to learn about, is to not use your nut milk bags. So I've gone through, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 different nut milk bags, some which have been better quality than others. And I would say right now my favorite is hemp fiber, and I'll link that in the description below. I've also used the cotton as well as the, I think it's nylon which tends to break quite easily depending on how much force you're putting onto your soy milk to extract it out, there's actually something even better than any nut milk bag that I have used. And if you can guess what that is, I'd be pretty surprised, because this is actually something that I never thought I would ever use, and that is a fruit press. So this is specifically something that's used to make apple juice. So you crush your apples with this thing and it squeezes out the apple juice, and you can actually use this for soy milk and soybeans. And it actually works really, really well, because as you may know, in one of my other videos, I broke one of my bamboo spatulas trying to squeeze out the soy milk from the nut milk bag. Because this thing is stainless steel, and because there's a screw on it, you can actually be very efficient as you're turning the handle to squeeze out all of the residual moisture in the soybeans and the soybean pulp. It is a game changer, life-changing. I could not imagine making soy milk going forward now that I have used this little fruit press device. And if you make soy milk regularly, or any kind of nut milk really, you can use this fruit press to help you extract the milk from whatever ingredient that you're using in a much more efficient manner than using a nut milk bag. And then the other thing is that you don't have to worry about it being hot, because as you know, freshly made soy milk is hot. And one of the things that you got to be careful with if you don't want to wait for it to cool down is burning yourself. So one thing that you can do is use silicone gloves, which you might have seen those on Amazon, but I don't think I'm really a fan of those, because your fingers are going to get all sweaty and stuff from dealing with a hot liquid. And plus you're going to be stuck with a nut milk bag again, which, like I said, is something that you don't want to use, especially if you make soy milk on a regular basis. So maybe I'll show you how I use that in a different video linked in the description below. And then the fifth tip that I have for you is to practice. I remember the first time that I ever made any kind of a nut milk. I think it was almond milk many years ago. I think I did a decent job. It's not too difficult to make, but I've definitely gotten better as I have practiced and continue to make it on a regular basis. And the same thing goes with any kind of plant milk, like soy milk, walnut milk, almond milk, pecan milk, macadamia milk, oat milk especially, which takes a little bit of practice, because if you over puree it, over process it, it might be a little bit slimy, but then if you under process it or puree it, it's not going to taste that good. So that one takes a little bit more practice as well. But all of these, as you practice and continue to make them over and over again, you're going to get better, you're going to get a feel for it, you're going to develop your intuition, and ultimately you're going to be a lot more efficient than you were the very first time that you made it. So that was my fifth tip for you. Let me know if there was anything that I missed, if you have any other tips that you think would benefit plant-based milk makers like myself or yourself, because chances are we could all learn from each other and make more plant-based milks more often. So difficult, fussy, time-intensive, labor-intensive, those are all things of the past. Now that you have these 5 tips for you to make plant-based milks more often, and especially so with soy milk. That's how I used to talk. That was my narrative, and now I'm a little bit more mindful of it thanks to those 2 books that I had mentioned previously about the power of positive thinking. And perhaps they will change you and impact your life in a positive way like they did for me. Because as you may know, what you focus on expands. What you believe and what you say tends to turn into reality. And is there truth in that? Perhaps you can try these experiments yourself and see if they work for you. The mind is a very powerful thing, is it not? So now that you know how to make soy milk much more simple and much more efficiently than you might have been making it, you might be wondering how you're going to be using these soy milks and these okaras. I don't know why I said it like that, but you might be wondering how you're going to be using your soy milk and your okara in your cooking. And in this next video, I'll be showing you a few ways that you can use your freshly made soy milk and your freshly made okara. Actually, it's probably going to be 2 videos.